Let's remember the victims of this case. If we can bring their photos back up. Of course, we're talking about Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband, and then Senator Hoffman and his wife, all shot. The Hortmans were killed. The Hoffmans shot multiple times, went into surgery at this point, as far as we know, have survived. We don't know exactly what that looks like or what that means. If they're going to be okay in the long run, we're still waiting for information about his condition and his wife's condition. But at this point, I think a lot of lawmakers and people who knew Representative Hoffman are really, grieving, and you can hear it in their voices when we've been speaking and interviewing them all morning long and all afternoon, just how sad they are. And this is, a person that reached across the aisle, represented the Democratic Party, however, reached across the aisle, very friendly. People love to work with her.
Right, a mom. She has two adult children. Obviously, she is a wife, and same with Senator Hoffman. He's a husband, and he has a daughter. They have an adult daughter as well. We've heard a lot about this, and again, just kind of piecing together what happened. The first crime scene, the first shooting was at the Hoffman's home in Champlin, and then about 7 miles down the road in Brooklyn Park is the Hortman's home. So not close or not too far apart. Right. Different jurisdictions, different areas, but close, relatively speaking.
Do we have that video of the Hoffman home? I think to see the front door with the holes in the front door in the glass is rather startling, but interesting given the circumstances. I don't know if we have that video.
We're working on that. As we work on that, we do have Corin. I believe Corin is standing by. He has been in Blaine all day, all morning. This has kind of been the command center for updates from officials. Corin, get us up to speed. What have you learned? We know the governor, of course, has been watching this, maybe even still there at that command center.
Yeah, absolutely. It is Kelly and Karen. He's just in the back here monitoring all the goings on here. I can tell you I did just get an update about Senator John Hoffman, and that was he is still alive and is expected to recover. A little bit of background on the scene there coming from a nephew is that, Senator Hoffman and his wife Yvette were at home, and so was their daughter Hope, their adult daughter Hope, who does have spina bifida. And as the gunman opened fire on them from this nephew, they were hit 6 and 5 times. But Yvette Hoffman literally diving in front of the gunman to make sure that Hope Hoffman did not get hit, and so literally probably saving her daughter's life. And the two Hoffmans are in the hospital, went through surgery. They are expected to survive, unlike the Hortmans. Mark and Melissa were both killed there. I've been giving you some personal reflections, I think, on Melissa Hortman. I've covered her for 3 sessions now, and we're looking at Senator Hoffman there. I can tell you a little bit more about Senator Hoffman. He is, from Champlin up there. He was the head of the Human Services Committee in the Senate. I worked with him on kind of a humorous story about a bill that he put up about trying to stop wake surfing on the Mississippi River over there between Champlin and Anoka and Coon Rapids. Kind of amusing thing because, wake surfing on a river is, didn't seem that serious, but he took it seriously when one of his constituents came to him and told him it was a problem that was eroding the shores along their homes. When it comes to Melissa Hortman, again, I've worked there for 3 sessions. I've probably had 100 conversations with her. She's just, like I said before, a consummate professional, but she's also a humorous person. She knew when to crack a joke, and she seemed very genuine when she did it. She was also one of the warmer people that you could meet at the legislature. She didn't just kind of talk with talking points inside of a box, and so she kind of, had this more human nature than a lot of politicians you talk to might. She could be hot, she could be cold, she could be warm, she could be, cunning, she could be clever, but she, really knew all the levers to push and pull. And it was a Republican former Representative Pat Garofalo who mentioned she was probably going to be the most significant speaker in the history of the legislature. That's 94 sessions, and she was the Speaker of the House for 3 of them, and Speaker Emerita in a tied House this year, and someone I was planning to interview just in 2 days to kind of get her thoughts on how the entire session went. I talked to her as the special session ended in the House just before midnight on Monday, and she was her typical self, and I never thought that the photo that I took of her at the podium that day would be the last one I ever took. But it looks like it will be. And I know, I've spoken to a lot of people who were at the Humphrey Mondale dinner last night, and same kind of sentiment is, they're taking pictures with her and her husband Mark, and at no point would they suspect that that was the last one that they would take.
Yeah, Corin, we can tell obviously this is hard. These are people. These are people that you interact with. Our political reporter, you know these people better than us, than most people. You have conversations with them. If you can, could you also talk a little bit about, if people haven't been as locked in as maybe you and others who are kind of more politically inclined, walk us through how the last couple of days unfolded in this session. It was a different session, the regular session, but also this special session, and the critical role that Hortman played in avoiding a government shutdown.
Yeah, as we reached kind of the end of the regular session, everything kind of was coming about late. Like the February budget forecast came in March. And then as they reached, nearly the end of the regular session, they finally came up with global budget targets, which is essentially, all the leaders telling all the different bill writers, this is how much money you have to spend. And at that point, figure it out. They couldn't. And I think I related a story about Speaker Emerita Hortman talking to us at the end of the regular session when she was asked basically why couldn't they corral all these people and get all these bills done. That was one of those times where she was humorous and maybe too much. She said she can't waterboard all these people, and then realized maybe waterboarding wasn't the right thing to invoke, and said we can't give them all colonoscopies. But so then in the time frame between the 3 weeks between the regular session and then finally getting to the special session, it was always the leaders of the legislature meeting with Governor Walz and especially his budget team. So that's, Speaker Emerita Hortman and Speaker Demuth in the tied House. That was Majority Leader Aaron Murphy in the Senate, occasionally Minority Leader Mark Johnson. The four of them, or the three of them, always meeting with Governor Walz, trying to hammer out all the details. These individual working groups were working on each individual bill, and some of them were able to come to agreements and figure things out and, get down the path to where they could have a full budget for the state of Minnesota. Some of them weren't even close. And so they go back there and, try to hammer things out with the leaders. This is kind of comparable to what they had a few years back before I got here, but in 2019 they had what they called the tribunal. But that would be, the leaders at that time would just tell the people, hey, this is how you're going to do it. They tried to be a little more friendly this time and let all the individual representatives, write their own bills and give them guidance. But near the end, some of the leaders had to step in and figure out a few things, and included among the things that they had to figure out was how to get these, the biggest thing that the GOP wanted and that the governor and the DFL leaders had agreed to was this cut to MnCare for undocumented immigrants. And I remember the press conference where they announced the global budget deal just before the end of the regular session, and immediately knew that Speaker Emerita Hortman and Majority Leader Murphy were in trouble with their caucuses, because right outside the governor's cabinet room where we were at the press conference where they were announcing this deal, we heard members of the Posse Caucus, the people of color and indigenous folks within the Senate and the House, pounding on the door, trying to get in, chanting, one Minnesota, kind of mockingly using the governor's own slogan against him. And we knew that they were going to be in trouble with their caucus, and that would create a whole new way that they had to negotiate these deals, because clearly, the health deal where MnCare gets its funding was not going to get enough Democratic support, if any Democratic support, to pass. And so, over those 3 weeks between the regular session and the special session, they figured out a way where they could pull that out of the health bill. And, Speaker Emerita Hortman and Majority Leader Murphy agreed that they would cast the decisive votes to make sure that those cuts, getting undocumented adults off of MinCare, they would cast the deciding votes to do that. I saw both of them cry over that. I'd never seen Melissa Hortman cry until she discussed that vote. Monday night, right as the House went out of session, the special session, it was the hardest thing she's ever done. Majority Leader Murphy said it was the hardest thing she had to do as well, but she made the agreement, and it was what she had to do to make sure that the state of Minnesota had a budget and there wasn't a government shutdown, and she kept true to her word on that, no matter how she hated that vote. And that was the kind of leader she was. She was, just pinpoint when it came to negotiations. And again, like I said, she knew how to pull all the levers in the government, but she also knew how to negotiate. And she was, at least in my experience, a woman of her word.
Okay, thank you, Corin. We know you're there with the governor who's monitoring the situation and the manhunt as it unfolds there at the command center. Thank you for that update and your experience, sharing your thoughts.